All right. So welcome to the first design recharge on Blab. So I'm real excited to have everybody here, and thank you for being flexible enough to go to a new platform with me. I will be figuring this out a little bit better, and I will do a test with myself right after this so that I can get everything worked out, because I'm having trouble with my listening from my mic. So it's like my external speaker or whatever. So I'll figure that out. But today we are starting new on Blab. I think this is episode 150 or something. So it's a pretty long time in. So here we go. So Danielle Langdon, I met at a conference for design professors. Well, not just for design professors, but any art professors. Anyway, and Danielle had this awesome talk that she gave. And she had so much energy, and she loves something that I love, greeting cards. And we both spend a lot of money on greeting cards. And so one of the things we wanted to ask you guys later, we'll ask you a couple questions about how you feel about greeting cards and what's important to you about them. But I'm going to tell you a little bit first. I'm going to tell you about Danielle in a second, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about Blab since you're new. So yeah, to your right, you're going to see the chat, and it's just, you can see when people come in. I think you can see when people subscribe. You can see when people tweet it out. So over on the left-hand side, you'll see it says tell a little bird or tell your friends, which is really kind of nice. It's great. I appreciate that. And it does come up on the right, on the chat, on the right-hand side, it comes up with your images. But you can also see above me, you can see some of the people that are here, and you can actually click on them. That's an easy way to follow them. You can follow them on Blab, and then you can also go to their Twitter handle and follow them there. So if you want to ask a question at the end, towards the end, I'm going to open it up, and if you want to come on screen, you can get all pretty before then if you want, or if you don't want to, you can just not let them use the camera, I guess. And then if you want to ask a question like that, I'm going to open it up at the end for that. But you can also type a / and then a Q, and then the question's going to come up in the chat with a little blue circle with a Q in it, but it's also going to populate over here on the left-hand side so that me and Danielle can see it a little bit easier. So, so Tiffany's here, and she loves letterpress, and she's a letterpress designer. And so I'm hoping you guys will be able to geek out a little bit on that too. So we're going to talk about a lot of other things that Danielle has. Danielle was a dancer. She really thinks that we probably as a culture spend too much time on our phone, and she's right there with us, I think. So, but that was one of the things that attracted me to Danielle. Mine is just that she's a great designer and letterer, and that she just has this really bubbly kind of personality. So Danielle, thank you so much for being ballsy and trying a new platform with me after we already did a test on the old one. And I just really appreciate your flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, me and myself are happy for you to be here too. So, and thank you guys for joining us on the day before Thanksgiving if you're in the United States. So thanks. And I'm sorry about the technical difficulty I had before. I always test on my laptop, and I should probably test on my big computer over here. But oh well. So Danielle, give us a little bit of your background, because it is different from a lot of designers. And then when did you start? When were you starting to be interested in design? Because you kind of have a not typical path.
Yeah. So I actually started taking landscape architecture classes in high school, which is like right back when it started, when I first started taking art classes. And then I hated that. I absolutely hated it. So in college, I decided not to take any art classes, but one of my first classes was public speaking. And so I thought, I really love this, and I'm going to go ahead and major in media communication studies. And I had been dancing my whole life, and same thing, first semester, I took one dance class and absolutely loved it. And so I thought, well, I might as well keep this going as well. So I double majored in media communications and dance. And then after I graduated from college, I got a job at an architecture firm in Princeton, New Jersey. And when I was there, I was just in the communications department, which ends up being kind of a blur of a lot of different jobs that you're doing. But while I was there, I got to do some design work, and it ended up being my favorite stuff. So I thought, okay, if I'm serious about this, if I really want to do it, I should probably go back to school and get some formal training as an artist and a designer, because I just hadn't had any at that point. So I was learning on the job largely, but I love to learn. And I think what I learned as an undergrad was actually how to learn. So more than anything at my liberal arts school, that was a skill that I really attained as a student. So I taught myself a lot on the job. And then even in graduate school, I feel like I taught myself a lot while I was there. So lots of reading. But that's kind of how I started to get into design. So it is kind of a non-traditional path.
So the dancing, so it was like your undergraduate, was it did you do communications, or did you do dance, or did you do both?
I did both. Yeah. So in the communications department, because it was a liberal arts school, we did all kinds of, the classes were not career focused. You kind of got a brushstroke of a lot of different things in communications. So I did some video art, I did some radio, I did a little bit of web design. But as a dancer, I sort of, like, my outlook, kind of my artistic release as an undergrad was through dance. And I brought that into some video work while I was an undergrad, but I definitely just kind of kept doing lots of random stuff as an undergrad, just trying to do as much as I could while I was in that kind of an environment.
Gotcha. All right. So what I thought was interesting was the dance part. And really, how do you think dance and design work together? And me and you already talked about this some, but how do you think dance influences how you design?
Yeah. So when I first started graduate school, I was kind of feeling out of place, like an imposter in this Master of Fine Arts program, having never taken an art class. So I thought, let me try and figure out some other designers who maybe have used dance and see if I can start to have a conversation that way about art, since that's what I was familiar with. So I was looking a lot at Oscar Schlemmer, who is a Bauhaus designer. And he was really interested in the geometry of space and the geometry of the human body and how those things relate to one another. So he was kind of obsessed with mass and volume, and he had all of his performers wearing these really ridiculous costumes. And he was one of my favorite designers. And so I started to think about what he was saying, and I was comparing it to this book that I started reading at the same time by Susan Foster. It's called Choreographing Empathy. And in that book, she starts talking about how dance is a universal language. So people use their bodies in kind of similar ways across all cultures. So it's an easy way for people to communicate without having to use words and language. And I was thinking about that in relation to design as well, these universal ways of looking at things or talking about things. So I made a couple pieces about that in a series called Body Speaks.
So I'm putting them up in the chat. If you guys see, like, she talked about some people, and I'm trying to go in order. So
yeah, that's the Oscar Schlemmer images there. That's one of my favorite photos of all time. It's so funny. So I started to make some work in response to these things I was reading and looking at, body language and communicating using kind of universal symbols. And after I made a few pieces, I decided, okay, I'm reading about a lot, I'm thinking about a lot, but it's all kind of coming out in this jumbled way. So I went into my graduate studio and I made a mind map in the whole space. I filled up all the walls in my studio with all the things that I'd been thinking about, talking about, looking at. It's kind of like a way to get it all out of me and see what I wanted to talk about with dance and design, not just what these other people had talked about before me, but like what's important to me. And so I was actually more interested, through that process, I found out I was more interested in the process of making, the creative process of making itself. So in dance, a lot of what you do is you create what we call scores. So it's basically like rules, and then you can improvise actual movement within those rules. So it's very much like creating a grid or having to work within a certain like branding standards. And then in that you have some flexibility and you can kind of improvise a little bit with what you're doing. So it came out that I was really interested in that, in the process and how those were really similar in dance and design.
All right. I have the mind map, and my mom just joined. Hey, Mom. And my sister probably. That's probably why. This new platform, I had to set her up with the Twitter address. So
yeah.
Okay, so the mind map, it was huge. You're literally wall to wall kind of going around.
Yeah,
so
that's
I
videotaped it too. There's a video of it on my Vimeo. I just uploaded it the other day because I forgot that I had that.
I think my mom's trying to come on, but I'm going to not have you on, Mom. I think my sister must have had to do a different one. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So that was really, it was more of a process thing for me about just the making process, trying to figure out myself as an artist, like how do I want to approach being this kind of a professional? And so I thought, well, I've got these skills as a dancer, and how can I apply that now to this new field that I'm trying to break into?
Right. Well, and I think it's funny that you also said, oh my gosh, you kind of felt like you were a poser or something, and I think that, and I wanted to say it's okay. So these little tans, I think, are funny because I like to touch things, but they're for props. They used to be called feels. So you can click anywhere in Danielle's thing and give her more hands ups, just so you know what those weird hand things are. So if you like what we're saying, you can always give us props. Anyway, all right. So back to what I was saying about feeling kind of like a fraud, like you felt. So you were at a University of Missouri, right? That's where you did your grad school. So how many people were like you and didn't come in your grad program, didn't come from a graphic design? Was it graphic design only, or was it all art?
It was all art. And at the time that I started, I was actually the only graphic design MFA. So I was very much on my own in that little department. Yeah. Most of them came from a very traditional, they got their BFA in painting, and then they came through to get their MFA. There were a few who went back like after undergrad and worked for a couple of years before coming to graduate school. Those are the students that I kind of connected with a little bit more because they had other things to talk about besides just art school.
Right. Well, you also so video played a role in undergrad, but then it also played a role in grad school. And it does have to do with the phone, right? And how connected we are. And so, for me, the promo image that I used for the show, the main thing was like, there's no one I'd rather lay in bed and look at my phone next to than you, kind of thing. And I just thought it was so funny, but it is so true. It's like, instead of talking to my husband, I'd rather play a game on my phone, right? Or whatever it is I'm doing. So talk a little bit about how video, especially, and how your other interests have kind of found their way into your design research.
Yeah. So again, this kind of started when I entered the University of Missouri's campus. This is really big and there's lots of people around. And I had never really been at a big school like that. And I was fascinated by the fact that most people walked around with their heads down, just buried in their device. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't tell if it was something about the environment itself or just the fact that this technology is still pretty new in our lives. And so it became the focus of my attention for my body of work for my thesis. So what I did was, to start out, I just kind of gathered a bunch of my students and my friends up, and I took them into this old, sort of abandoned gymnasium on campus. And I started staging them in these kind of absurd positions. And I'd make them text on their phone while they were standing on one leg and hopping around, or, I just
spin in circles, right?
Spin in circles. Yeah. Follow each other around the space. And I would send them these instructions via my own smartphone. So I'd be texting the group, and they'd kind of get them one by one. It would trickle in, and then they'd start to move together. And then I just pushed it as far as I could. So I took them out in the middle of campus, and I had them lay down in this big courtyard where all these people were walking by. We went to one of the sports fields, this big group that I had, and they got to be really funny. So it was kind of like, I am critical of our mindless way of using these devices, but at the same time, I wanted to kind of approach it from a humorous perspective. So it wasn't like I was slamming people over the head with this message, but more of just an opportunity to have a little bit of self-reflection. Like, how much do we want to let this stuff take over? Yes, it's really helpful and it's fast and wonderful, but you know, do we want to walk into a fountain in the middle of campus because we're not paying attention? You know? Yeah. And then I also wanted to show in that body of work some more experiences that we probably all see on a daily basis, like a couple having dinner together, and instead of talking to one another, they're both on their phone. So I had two of my friends like fake a picnic setting. And I tried to push the absurdity in that video as well. I had like the girl throw a glass of water at my friend, and, you know, so it was always kind of meant to be a little bit funny, but critical at the same time.
Well, do you think that for you, are you like that with your phone? I mean, are you guilty and it's like you're talking to yourself just as much as you're talking?
Oh yeah. So I was late to the smartphone game. I did not get it when most other people did. I had a flip for a long time. Yeah, I did. And then I even started this body of work before I had a smartphone. So, but then somewhere in the middle, I was like, all right, I'm going to get one of these. I'm going to see what all this hype is about. And I immediately became one of the people that I was critiquing. It was like, man, everything is right here at my fingertips. This is so easy. Why did I resist this for so long? And I've just upgraded at every opportunity to get the newest, coolest phone. Yeah, I completely gave into it. So, but I am also critiquing myself, because I started to realize how important it was to leave yourself spaces in your daily life where you're not using it. So like, I forbid myself from bringing it to the kitchen table. I leave it over somewhere else. I'm not tempted. But I've had to force myself to do those things, like turn it off at a certain hour. Don't bring it into this room. Like, yeah. So it's definitely a self-critique as much as it is a critique of other people.
Well, and I think I really see it as an observation. I shared your Vimeo, so you guys can see it over on the right-hand side. And she has a lot of these videos where it looks like one of them's like these sorority girl kind of on this lawn, and then they just start doing things, but they're always, you know, looking down. And I always think, you know, my neck hurts, but I am bound to this phone thing. And so I always think, you know, chiropractors, or they're, you know, we're just helping their business by having these phones. But I know it will show up on our bones or something, you know, because we are looking down so much.
Yeah, that was a lot of the research I did was both the physical effects that these have on us and the psychological. So the physical effects in that part of the research, I brought a lot of my dance background into that, because I had read a ton about mindful movements through your everyday routines. You know, I had an instructor as an undergrad, my dance instructor, who used to tell me, when you're driving your car, lift your arms up from your back. Don't just lift your arms up and let them hang on the steering wheel. And so that's something, every time I get in my car and I drive, I lift my arms up from the back. And so I was thinking about all of these things while I was making this body of work, basically just, do we want to just be habitual all the time, or do we want to maybe think a little bit more about how these devices are affecting our connections, our bodies, all these things?
Well, I mean, it's like right now you're in Missouri, right?
Right.
And I'm in Alabama. And so this device is helping us to connect. And I know Jeremy, he's in North Carolina, he's able to watch it on his phone because Blab has a great phone app as well. So, you know, it's like we're all able to connect, but it's also really important that we all get together in person at some point, right? And you can have great relationships, but we still need to have some physicality. And it's kind of like, I would think it was kind of like dance maybe, but where you can all do the same thing, but when you all get together, like, you know, those people who will practice those where they kind of spoof somebody kind of, or trick somebody, and they're all practicing on their own, but then they get together and they sing or they dance or whatever. And I think that's where the power comes in, that we can use this tool, but again, it's a tool for connecting, but we still need to connect in real life.
And I don't know if you've ever had, like, I have a lot of clients that I work with completely remotely, and my relationship with them is very different than a relationship with a client who's local, who I can sit down with and talk to occasionally. it's either all business with the remote client, or you can establish some kind of personal connection to somebody you're sitting down and actually like drinking a coffee next to, or yeah. So I think there is some value still to having, I'm not anti-technology. I make that clear.
Yeah, you have a flip phone.
I know, yeah. Yeah, I love it. But it is just a matter of maybe thinking a little bit more about how we want it to look in the future. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's just really important to be in the moment with the people you're in the moment with. And that's why that card you made was so impactful to me, I guess. And my husband, I told him about it, and he was like, "That's totally you." Yeah. And I'm like, "I know, I'm sorry," but you know, I think for me, and I teach. You know, Danielle and I are both design educators, and I teach my kids to use, you know, hey, you got to use your time wisely. You're standing in line, check your email. You know, you're at the grocery store waiting for something, check your email or check your calendar, do whatever. And I mean, that's the first thing I do in the morning. I walk to the toilet, pee, and I check my calendar, see what we're going to be doing today. And then, you know, I use my time like I'm not ever, I should look more. Right. I should just rest, but I like to be busy. That's my addiction, I think, is being busy. So let's talk about your addiction of cards.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know what you guys think is a lot of cards to buy in a year. So if you guys in the chat could write down how many cards you think you buy a year, and not like at Christmas, we're excluding the holiday season, like for birthdays or holidays that are not, Jesus related, I guess, or Hanukkah or whatever you celebrate in December. 2 to 3, Derek says. CMYKC podcast says 3 excluding Christmas. Brian says 2 to 5, but he's a dude. So is Derek. He's 2 to 3. We could tell. Any women here? Tiffany, are you going to chime in? Tell us how many. So I'm going to tell you what I do. So Derek says primarily artistic. Tiffany has twins and other children, so she had a handful of baby. Primarily artistic handmade cards to accent a nice gift for sure. So I probably spend about $50 at Mother's Day. And you're thinking, oh, that's nice. You get your mom a $50 gift. No, that's at Hallmark. That's cards, and they don't all go to my mom. I have aunts, and, you know, apparently Brian does hate his mom. We'll have to get on to you about that later. But yeah, aunts, friends, girlfriends that are finally moms, you know, like sending these things, other women that have been like mom roles to me. You know, I think I probably spend about $50 on Mother's Day, and I'm probably buying about 25 cards on just Mother's Day. So what do you think is a big number of people? Like, do you think 25 in one holiday is a pretty big number? What's your biggest holiday that you buy the most cards for, Danielle?
Ooh, the most cards?
Not excluding Christmas or New Year's or whatever.
Oh, that's a good question. It's probably, if I could lump together Mother's Day and Father's Day, because I do a lot for both of those. I don't know which one would beat the other one out. They're two big ones. And then every person I know gets a birthday card from me. So if I could also lump birthdays together, that would probably be the biggest number. Okay, yeah, birthdays. And that's a lot of commitment. Yeah, I got a calendar dedicated just to people's birthdays so that I know who gets what when.
Yeah, that's a commitment. My mom gives me stamps for Christmas, or Santa still gives me stamps. Santa doesn't bring my sister stamps because she doesn't check her mail. Things get sent back to me if I've sent it to my sister because she's left it in her mailbox.
Yeah.
She's done better. She's probably going to be like mad at me for saying that, but but my mom gives me stamps because she knows I like to send that out. And I usually send each of my mom and my dad both get like 2 birthday cards each, which you probably do more than that for your parents. But you have an addiction, right? An obsession, maybe?
Yeah, it's an obsession. It's definitely an obsession.
Tell us about what kind of cards do you like?
It started a long time ago when I was very young. I started making cards with these terrible, like flowery borders around them. And before I knew anything about copyright infringement, I also used to write Danielle's hallmark on the back of all of them. And my mom saved like every single one. And I started saving cards when I was really little. I have like all the cards for my first, second, third birthday. The very first card my brother ever made for me, I saved.
I just put it up.
I have that one. It's great. It's got a drawing of me on it that's like top notch.
So you had a little ear surgery, I guess? Maybe?
Yeah, a little bit. I had a toupee and ear surgery. And
that would have been rough growing up with that, so I can understand.
I didn't have a neck or anything. No, it was, but I started saving and making them when I was really young, and that obsession never died down. I spend hours and hours in Hallmark, like staring at those aisles. It's gotten to the point where my fiance knows if we're going anywhere near cards at all, he needs to like leave, or he won't come with me because he knows it's going to take me forever if I'm near them. But so I saw that the obsession conference topic at CCAC, and I thought this is the perfect opportunity for me to finally admit how big this obsession really is, both to myself and then to other people, because why not? And then after the conference, that's when I started my 365 cards Instagram, where I attempted to make a card every day for a year. I have failed on that mission. There are many weekends when I cannot make a card a day, but I have made quite a few. And it's just fed the obsession more than I ever thought it would. So it's pretty bad. I make them all the time. I love, my favorite kinds are the ones that have really good typography on them. It gets me every time. Letterpress cards. You just can't go wrong with a good letterpress card.
And there are different lines at the Hallmark store, right? Not like physical lines, but like there's different brands of lines of cards. And there are some that have more of a textured and more of a letterpress feel. Some of them are weird humored. I always have enjoyed the ones that are blank on the inside because I like to, kind of let it speak for itself. But, I'm not really much for I guess I don't buy those cards that say that have a lot of glitter maybe or something. And I like glitter, but I'm not but I don't really, I guess I don't buy those, even those birthday. I mean, I don't have any kids, so maybe that's why. I think glitter goes with kids or something.
Yeah, well, maybe. Glitter, if you send a glitter card, it ends up being a glitter bomb when whoever is the recipient opens it, and then they get glitter everywhere, and you can't glitter stays for years. That's not going anywhere. So yeah, I try to steer clear of the cards that have a ton of text on them, like the ones that have a poem that takes up the whole front and then another poem that fills up the whole inside. It just feels a little bit like, a little cheesy to me. I like simple, I like witty, straightforward card, and then I'll fill it up with my own words.
So Tiffany says poem cards are kind of awkward to her. And it kind of feels forced to me, like they're forcing, and that's not really how I feel. I guess that's why I like the ones that are blank, that I can make up my own.
Yeah. I also kind of like cards that are versatile, that could be used for any occasion, where it's just a nice pattern on the front, something that has really good coloring. That I could potentially, that time that I forget it's someone's birthday and I have to send them a card immediately, I can pull out that very versatile card that doesn't necessarily say anything on the inside and use it. So those are also really good. So
CMYKC, which is a Kansas City podcaster who obviously is a designer, he says, when will the biodegradable, fast dissolving glitter become a thing? I think that is the next thing. I have a friend, Jay, who won't even open a card if it has anything. He's like, I'm not opening your Christmas card if it all looks like it has glitter on it.
Yep.
Because I do not want glitter in my house and, you know, whatever. He's just completely opposed. So, Derek says there's really something to be said for a nice handwritten note and card. And I hope, especially with the strength of the letterpress movement and hand lettering, that snail mail will become popular again. I definitely agree with that. Even if I buy something online from someone like on Etsy or just a local, I always think, oh, you know, I really hope I get a note from them. Like, thanks for buying. Hey, Mitch, I just saw you come in. I'm excited that you're here. Thanks. My first blab, real one, I guess, not my test ones. All right. So we're talking about cards and we're talking about any kind of design obsession. So, or things that you're obsessed with doing. So you've really been kind of obsessed with cards for a long time, and now you understand copyright, and now you don't rip off Hallmark. So that's right. Great. But you also said it was kind of like when you did this presentation, it was kind of eye-opening because you came back and you were like, you know what, I'm going to share this with my students. And so how do you think this impacted you as a professor by them seeing you're a little bit into your crazy?
That's great. Into my crazy. Yeah, it's very true. Well, to that point, I had only been teaching full-time for, I think it was a year at that point. So I was still really trying to establish myself as being a professor and gaining respect in the classroom. So I was a little bit afraid to admit anything about myself personally. But yeah, when I came back from the conference, I thought, well, that went really well and I enjoyed talking about it. And this could be a really fun way for me to connect to them. So I told them about it. I gave that same presentation to one of my classes and they loved it. And then we had conversation starters for almost every class. And then I started the Instagram and I immediately tried to follow as many of my students as I could. So then that way they would follow me back and it would be a way for me to make sure that they're looking at least some design every day. You know, when they see my feed come up on their, or my design come up on their feed, then they're looking at it, they're thinking about it, they're thinking about design. It may be in a you know, like not an obvious way, but I also had them help me come up with ideas for the cards.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I introduced a card project into one of my classes, and I told them if their cards came out good enough, I'd put them on my Instagram page as kind of a shout out. So it was a really fun way for us to connect through this platform of both Instagram and greeting cards, which are like a fun soundbite of a design project that is easy enough to do every day. It's a great way to start talking with them in a way that they think it's easy too. So it was a lot of fun, and I still have it going. My graphic design 2 students are starting their greeting card project as soon as we get back from break. So
How much longer do you have? We only have a week.
Yeah, we have two weeks left, I think.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah.
Well, I like that we have 3 days left. That's
nice.
Excited about that. So how well, you kind of took. I'm not reading ahead. So I get nervous when I'm presenting in front of people, and I imagine this is sort of like what you were saying you felt when you were in grad school, where you were kind of like, oh no. And I've done this as well. I'm going to be found out. They're going to know I'm a fraud if but I've already committed to making this panel. And I think you have to have some courage, but I think it is something that opens you up, and it's the reality. And we talk about this a lot just in social media. And Mitch is great about talking about this in social media, being yourself instead of just being what you think they need you to be. And that's why I thought that was so important, that even as a first year professor, you were like, you know what, I'm going to, I always talk about behind the curtain, like I'm going to take you behind the curtain and show you the crazy that goes on. But I think it's good because then they realize that, hey, wow, I can use all these other things to kind of eat better visually. And I think even if you're not in school, you still have to keep learning as a designer. We're always learning. Things are always changing. You have to keep up. And it's really important that you are eating good visually instead of just staying stuck in the 70s or whenever it was that you love, I guess. So I get pretty nervous when I'm presenting a paper in front of my peers, amongst other design professors, in front of my students, I guess, because they don't know what is wrong. So I can kind of like fake it the next day if I said something wrong or I misspoke. But how much courage did that take for you? Did you have any second thoughts? Like when you submitted the paper topic, because usually how it goes is you submit a topic to a panel and then they say yes or no. So was it at that point that you were like, oh no, I hit send already? Or was it when you were there and you're like, should I change and do something else?
Yeah, it happened twice. When I saw the topic and I decided to submit, I had all the confidence in the world because I was backed up by three of my biggest supporters, Rick, Jean, and Deborah, who were my three mentors at MU. They were all going to the conference and they were like, submit, it's going to be great, do it, we love you. And so I thought, I've got this amazing support system. I feel really confident about this. And I hit submit. And then when I got word back that I had been accepted and that I was actually going to have to present on this, then I was like, oh God. I'm actually going to have to really talk about this obsession among all these people who are here talking about really serious design topics. Like, is this going to hold up? Is it even worth me? Who cares what I'm obsessed with? None of these people are going to care. So then when I got to the conference and I met a lot of the people who were there and I started to feel a little bit, thankfully I didn't present on the first day. I think I presented on the second day. So I had a day to get comfortable in this location around some of these people. And then, you get those pre-talk jitters. But by that point, I was like, I've committed, this is happening. I may as well just get up there and use all those skills I learned in public speaking and just, being a little bit vulnerable too, is not a bad thing. It sheds light on a lot of, what you're really feeling and thinking. And I think people connect to that pretty well. So it was a good room to present in. It was a good group to present to. And afterwards I felt like, man, I am part of one of the coolest communities in the world. Yeah. I love this field. I love talking about design, no matter if it's about a tiny little greedy card obsession or all the way to, is design art? Like, all of those conversations happen at that conference. And so I don't regret it at all. I think it was really valuable for me to get out there and just, be an open book.
Behind the curtain.
Yeah, welcome to my behind the curtain.
And I think Kimberly Elam, who is in the design world, she's done a ton of books about grid and type art design systems. And I'm like, ooh, she's awesome. And I think you were in the same one as her. I can't remember if you were before her or after her. I'm sure
after
you were
her.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think she started it off. But I would have been like, oh my gosh, I hate following her. But I remember my very first CCAC, which this is the conference we're talking about. I remember I was the last person to go, and I was the second to last person. My friend Troy was going after me, and I didn't know Troy that well. I didn't know anybody really. And I was like, and I really let my crazy go. And my boss was in the room and he knows I'm crazy. So that was okay. But it was, I talk really fast, and it was, it was funny. I was funny. And that was not my goal necessarily to be funny, but I used my humor to make a statement. So, and I think you did that too. You have a lot of great energy. And I think that also really helps in the classroom. I think it also helps when you're talking with a client, like you talked about, making a connection when your clients across the country. And, I actually really think it's important to try to set up a face-to-face talk, when you can't meet, when you don't live in the same state or you can't meet in person. How do you think that's helped you with clients? And I know that wasn't on our questions. That's just a side. Sorry.
I can talk about that. Yeah. It's hard to express real emotion digitally. So I can't really be sarcastic or witty or bubbly in an email. I am all professional in digital correspondence. It's down to business the entire time, which, some clients prefer that. They don't really want to get to know you. They just want to get this job done. And that's fine too. But for me, if I want to feel invested in the project and I care about the project enough, I will go out of my way to make sure we have at least one face-to-face meeting so you can get a feeling for how much I care about this project and how well I want to do on it. And that comes through really quickly for me in face-to-face meetings. I remember having job interviews over the phone and I bombed them because I tried to be funny, and you can't really be funny on the phone.
You're like, I'm better in person.
Yeah. I'm like, see me face-to-face and you'll get this facial expression that I'm giving right now. Yeah. I wear my heart on my sleeve. My facial expressions are very telling. My personality is pretty loud. So I feel like it's important to get those face-to-face meetings if you can. Right. And if the client wants them too, then it's pretty easy.
So, I think it's completely, and we're going to go to number 7 in just a second, but I also think about, design and dance. And again, those are, you really think, oh, wow, she's a dancer before she was a designer. That's crazy. But I also think, I use physicalness in my classes, and any student knows. I'm going to use my little bird here. Pretend like this is a student.
Got it.
Their head, maybe, not just, anyway, so this is a whole person, not just a little bird. So I'll say, this is you, and this is how your type is really close. And I'll get right up on them. And I said, is this uncomfortable? And of course they move away. And I'm like, no, come back. Your type is way too close. And, it's like this, and they are really uncomfortable, but that's where dance comes in. You have a space, and you have to have, your images, image to image, there's connections, or image to type. And so I think that that's what is really beautiful about, what you learned from dance that you can bring into, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. It's a lot of spatial awareness. Absolutely. That I have on a lot of different levels, 2D, 3D. It's all about that space.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So your cards take a ton of different forms, and I love the patterns and the illustrations. I think that's like one of your superpowers for sure. I also really like, so me and you were both in Megan D's, and Megan's been on and talked about this before, about these little things that she sends out. And this is where she shows her crazy as well. And she admits that. Thanks so much, Mitch. I'm super happy that you were here. Sorry. So she talks, and she just lets it go, and she just doesn't worry about making something ugly. And she's like, well, I just throw that away, Diane, if I don't like it. And I'm like, oh, I just can't get past the making the ugly thing. And so I am deer in headlights a lot of times. So, but there's this one piece. So I'm going to put up the pattern one that you have.
Okay.
And this is just a beautiful, cute pattern. And then you have this other pattern that you didn't like what you had done. Can you tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, so I drew something. At this point, I'm not even really sure what it was, but I made a little illustration, and I just hated it. I was like, what am I doing? This is terrible. And I made it too quickly. I didn't think about it. I just kind of drew it out. And I, in frustration, scribbled over it. And then I was like, the scribble looks way more interesting than the drawing did. So I scribbled more, and I got a couple different size pens, and I just scribbled over the whole thing. And then I cut the paper up in a bunch of different, triangle type shapes. And then I made a pile of it on my desk. I took a couple pictures of it in the pile, and then I spread it out a little bit more, and I took a few more pictures, and then I brought it in, and I made a card out of the scribble scraps, basically. Right. And part of the reason why I think I even went through that whole process is because in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I have to make a card today. And I ruined the illustration, but I have to make one anyway. So this is going to be something, whether or not I like it. But that happens pretty often now with this. I think the 365-day card project has forced me to be okay with something ugly. Because I haven't really given myself the option. I don't have a lot of time every day to spend on making a beautiful card. So I have to make something.
Right.
even
And
if it's scraps.
I think it is that deadline and that you're just getting it out. You're going to make 365 of these. You have an expectation that they're not going to all be like winners. But it's such a neat, like you're using black and white. And I actually I shared the link to the Flickr of that one image so that people can go there and see.
Yeah.
That it's still small. Like you still decided to cut. You didn't want anybody to see the drawing. Not that you scratched out enough, but you wanted to cut the pieces small enough. Like there's so much in there that I think, and there it's like this kind of tornado. It looks like there's a point like Kimberly Elam has something that's like a radial thing where it kind of radiates out from that. And it kind of looks like it kind of is doing that. And so I really think that's an interesting way. And it was like, you know what, but I'm getting something out. I can't waste what I've done. Let's keep going. And I love that. So, all right, let's see what, sometimes the stuff you hate turns out to be so nice. Tiff says, I have some prints that she did in college that way. And then Brian says he loves the tenacity. And Derek says, nice to see the up close by clicking. I'm sure everyone has figured that out. Oh, well, there, I don't even need to do that. So that's even better. I don't have to share the Flickr. Okay, good. Thank you, Derek, for helping me learn something. So you can click on the image and it'll get bigger.
Yeah, I think it shows a little bit of my aggression too. Sometimes that you know, if you really do hate something, and then I'm just going to tear it up into a million pieces. That's dedication.
It is, and that you didn't just throw it away, or that you felt. So this is a social media thing because you're trying to be present. You're also trying to show your students that this is something to do. You're helping them eat better visually, and also showing them to be a little courageous, I think, by putting stuff out there and maybe you're making something that was not so beautiful. But I bet you if you had just left it, like I always think some of those bad drawings, like I really have to stop myself from scratching through them. Like, because I'm like, that's ugly. And then I look back like a couple of months later and I'm like, it wasn't really that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I probably could have stopped before cutting, and I know I probably could have. I made that card in the classroom. Like my students were working on a project and I was sort of sitting amongst them making this card. And that was a bit more ammunition to finish, to actually make something come of this illustration that was not very good. And I wanted them to see that process, my process of not just throwing it away and starting over, but you can turn ugly into beautiful, So it was a learning moment as well for my students when I did that.
Well, it's also being a deadline that I'm still going to meet the deadline and that I can't make something ugly beautiful. Right. I think that's great. I like showing those things too. I totally don't always have it together, and they get to see me in a failure position. I think that's important.
Yeah, because
they can't have that. But so, how do you think sharing your cards on social media has affected your confidence? You don't seem like you're super unconfident. So that's
thank
always
you.
Well, it's probably because of that diploma you got back there. We already talked about that.
My Excellence of Dance Award right there.
Yeah. I can dress myself back there. So I'm just kidding. There's
there it is. Right.
One I gave myself.
I don't know that it's really changed my confidence level. I think having to put all of your work out there on Instagram for people to see, if anything, has made me maybe just a little bit more aware of my own process and my own evolution as a designer.
Yeah.
So, and also just what I was thinking about at that time or what was influencing me. Confidence-wise, I mean, putting yourself on display is always going to kind of make you think about, am I worthy of this? Should I, am I an imposter? Do I belong here? So I've gotten a lot of followers that I didn't expect to get on Instagram. I have connected with my students more than I thought that I would. So I'm confident in the fact that doing this Instagram was worthwhile for me, and it still is worthwhile. But as far as, a designer, I think it's just been more of an insight into my process and how I've evolved over the last year.
Yeah. And I think I know Bob Ewing, when I had him on, he didn't do a 365 project. I mean, he did it for 500 and something days, where it was a lettering, and he was learning, he was teaching himself lettering, and he just shared it. And I know Scott Biersack did a 365 as well, or, a few years ago, where there is something to be said where you can go back and look. And I think Bob even has a Vimeo, which that may be an interesting thing for you to do, is put all your cards and show the year and show that progression, because at some point you get to a point where you feel like you're making the same thing, and you have to push yourself. So then what happened? Where was the breaking point? How many days in were you at that breaking point? Or when did you, and what were you doing? And I think those things really help. The Instagram is at 365 cards, CARDS. Let me type it in there for you. And I can't type and talk, so I think that's right?
Yeah, that's right.
But I think that's really important for people, especially people who are busy, like Tiffany. She's a mom. She has her own business. She's, doing all this stuff. It's important to have that side project, even if it's not a daily, if it's weekly, right, and then be able to have something to look at, to see and assess. I think something daily is always great. But sometimes it's harder for people to fit it in.
Yeah, even weekly. I can see the points over the last year when I did not have time to make cards, and I can see I look back pretty often through the Instagram account to see what I was making before and what I'm making now. And the things that have influenced me in the designs changed a lot, what I was thinking about and where I got inspiration from. In the beginning was pretty I need to think about what and then at the end, it's I just really want a coffee today, so I'm going to make a coffee card. I've become less critical of my original ideas, or, thinking that everything has to be really thought out and wonderful. Sometimes it can just be something real simple, like a fall pattern. And it's just as successful as one that I spent all day thinking about. So that has definitely been pretty telling for me on that social media account.
And really that's what we're supposed to be doing. It's you've got to get it out. But if for me, I'm telling myself this, I'm oh, listen, Diane. And then me over here, no, I got too much to do or something. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's just about getting it out, because then you might get wow, I really liked those, or I really liked how it turned out, or
right.
So most of them, are they done all by hand and then you're just scanning it in, or are you creating some and then you're putting in the computer and making a pattern? Or
oh, they're all different. Some of them I draw with hand, scan it in, put it on a card. Others I make entirely by hand, not using the computer at all. Some I also use the Instagram account to post cards that other people have made or given me, or ones that I find when I'm out and about. So they're not all made by me. It's a smattering of all different stuff made by all different people. But the ones that I make, I've tried a lot of new processes for myself too. Like the illustrations, I was never much of an illustrator before this project. Again, not having an art background, and never took a drawing class. So I've kind of been sitting in now on drawing classes in my department and trying to get better at some of these skills that I insist that my students know.
Right.
Yeah. I'm you need to be a really good drawer. You need to know how to do hand-drawn type. So I'm I better get better at this myself.
Yeah.
So a lot of the processes for making the cards changes daily. I'm always trying new things, which is good.
I do. I think that's good. And that helps you. And you being you liking to learn and loving that research really, really helps. So we're going to run out of time, but I got to get to my favorite card.
Okay.
So my favorite card, the card, I don't remember where it was in your talk.
It was at the end.
This was I just remember this, and I thought it was so funny. I had to write it down because I thought it was so funny. And if you zoom in, it says, and I've already mentioned it earlier, it says, "There's nobody else I'd rather lie in bed and look at my phone next to." And I just think you gave this to your fiance in a anniversary, or was it Thanksgiving? No, it was Valentine's or something, right?
Valentine's Day card, yeah.
So I mean, this was was this in grad school when you gave this, when you were doing all the cell phone stuff?
I think it was right at the end. So it may have been the year I was graduating or right after. Yeah, so it was definitely a culmination of a lot of things that this card came out. And I almost feel like, well, I'll admit nothing is original, but I feel like I read something like this in my research during grad school, like something about people lying in bed and looking at their phones next to each other instead of communicating. And I remember reading whatever I was reading at the moment and thinking, oh my God, we do that all the time. And so then I made this card with that little phrase on it, kind of simplified phrase. Yeah. And I lost the card. I don't know. He didn't save it. He doesn't care that I make him cards all the time, but he didn't save it. So I think I actually had to recreate it a little bit. And I added those little phones at the bottom. I don't think those were on the original, but yeah, I don't know. It was really funny. It was kind of a culmination of me thinking about all of these things. And again, trying to be sort of humorous in my critique of us. Like, yes, we do this and it's terrible, but it's also pretty hilarious that we do this. I think adding a little bit of humor into a critique makes it easier to swallow. So
yeah, definitely. So it seems to me, even if you read it somewhere, but it was like, whoa, this is us. And for me, I totally, my husband does not look at his phone in the bed. He doesn't even carry, it's not even in the bedroom. Like he plugs it up in the kitchen. Like I'm like, I know.
How do you do that?
Well, he has my old phone and I have my sister's old phone. So, his doesn't work as good. So, but he's always at me about not being on my phone. But it used to be that he did, was like reading in bed. And so now he doesn't even care. He's like, read all you want, but just get off the phone, and I think it's funny about just the changes, and what we're okay. It's still looking down, a book's still looking down. Yeah.
It still means not engaging with the person sitting with you, right? The difference between a book and a phone is really kind of minimal besides the light that you're getting from the phone. I mean, otherwise you're reading something and you're not talking. So it's virtually the same, right? So what are we willing to accept or not accept? And so it is just kind of a funny conversation that I think it's important to have, whether or not it's really serious or really lighthearted. It's just, what matters to you in your daily routine? What do you want to keep and what do you want to get rid of? Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. So what's next for you? I know we didn't get through everything, but we did pretty good. I'm super excited. And we had a little bit of technical. I had technical difficulty. You were fine. So what's next for you? What would you love to be doing? And do you have a side project other than the cards?
Yes, I would love to have tenure. That is what I'm working towards right now. So giving a lot of my time to Columbia College at the moment. Teaching is absolutely my bread and butter. I love the card projects. I love making videos. I love working with clients, but teaching is where I get the most joy out of being in the classroom with engaged students. It just, nothing beats that at all. Both of my parents were teachers, and so for almost my entire life, I was in denial. I was like, I am not going to be a teacher. I saw what that was like. That was hell. There's no way. But then as soon as I started teaching in graduate school, I was like, oh man, it's in my blood. I'm going to have to do this forever now. So yeah, I want to get tenure. And as far as another project that I'm working on, I am currently collaborating with the Immersion Visualization Laboratory at the University of Missouri, which is a motion capture laboratory. So I've been going in there and doing some motion capture studies where I put this suit on and it has all these sensors on it. And then I do some of my performance pieces, which captures the sensor data. And then we're building models onto that data to kind of make some new video artworks. I have a solo show coming up in April. All that will be on display. So I have one piece done if you want to check it out on the Vimeo, on my Vimeo page. That's the first attempt at motion capture, and it's pretty hilarious. So
well, I'm going to share all of your things right now so guys can follow her on Instagram. There's her Vimeo, there's her Twitter, and her personal website. And then she's a professor at Columbia College. And then that's her profile there. So
that's me.
It's 2 years, right? You've been there for 2 years.
This is the oh wow! I go up for mid pro in the fall, so this is my fourth. So this is the end of my third.
Oh well, good.
Yeah, the end of spring will be the end of my third year. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. Well, good luck. Of course.
Thank you.
I hope it goes smashingly smoothly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, totally awesome guest. I'm super excited. And so I'm going to open up the seat. Oops, not lock seat. I mean open seat. So I guess I don't know how to, anyway. So if anybody would like to ask Danielle a question, we're trying something totally different. And I know we're over, it's a little over after 2:30 where I am. So we've been on an hour. So if anybody wants to come on, you're welcome to. But if nobody is, that's awesome too. I am going to paste my stuff in now. You can follow me on Instagram at Design Recharge, or follow me on Twitter at Design Recharge. Or if you have a question or you have an idea, you can email me at diane@designrecharge.org, or you can rechargingyou.com is fine. I'm super excited that you were able to do and try. And I told Danielle earlier this morning, I was like, thank you for being flexible enough to do this new platform. So I definitely would like to hear what you guys think about this. I'm all up for new suggestions. And I got a ton of suggestions a few weeks ago when I asked about platforms. And so Jeremy's talking that he would come on, but there's a lot of background coffee noises. And then Tiffany's like, ooh, coffee.
Coffee shop.
And her babies are way loud right now, but not worry, grinding coffee noises. I'm sure they're back in the background, making her espresso or something, right? Not quite. One day, Tiffany, one day.
I may or may not have showered. That's great.
That's okay too. So, but definitely want to see what you guys think. So if you want to send me an email or send me a private message on Twitter or something like that, that would be great. Or a rate on Twitter. That's awesome too. So next week, I'm real excited to have as our final guest of the year, because I take off most of December. We are having Rocky Rourke, and he is the founder, creator. He just had a successful launch of his Kickstarter. So it'll be on Blab next Wednesday, regular time, 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern. My ears are falling out. So, I mean, just these, I didn't have big ears like Danielle's brother drew her. But I think it's great that your mom keeps everything, and then your fiance throws everything away.
Yeah.
So, I just think that's hilarious. But I really appreciate you guys for being here and trying this. I know it was new, and I appreciate you guys. Any comments that you want to give? So join me next week for Rocky. He's new. He's young. I guess he's not new, but he's a young designer that's doing some great stuff. Great illustrator, but he also does, I believe, UX UI stuff. But we're going to be talking about his stickers and his hand lettering and how he connects with other people. So it'll be good for your students to watch too. Really good eating. He's from Georgia originally, and now he lives in California. So it'll be nice to, maybe he's home for Thanksgiving this week or whatever. So anyway, great. Good to know. I think Derek says that he likes it's good platform, like it better, good guest, and interesting topic. Good. I'm glad. All right. Well, you guys have a happy Thanksgiving if you're in the United States. If you're not, just have a happy Thursday. And you guys have a great week. Thanks so much, Danielle. And so I'm going to stop recording.